Today we are honored to have Ronald Crone here with us. Ronald has more than 30 years of the experience in engineering. He joined the Idaho National Laboratory in January 2015, serving as an associate laboratory director for materials and fuel complex since that time. Previously, he served as an associate laboratory director for the Neutron Science Directorate of Oak Ridge National Lab. He was responsible for the management of the nuclear science research and development portfolio, which include the operation of the installation of neutron source and the high flux isotope reactor. When he was in orbit, he worked at the high flux isotope reactor in technical leadership roles in operation, maintenance, and engineering. He was the director of research reactor division for over 7 years. He began his career in the reactor engineering group at the Davis Bay Nuclear Power Station near Toledo, Ohio. He then worked at the Yankee Road Nuclear Power Station in Rome, Massachusetts, as a reactor engineer and chief technical advisor. He moved to Tennessee and worked and joined the staff of the high flux isotope reactor in 1992. He holds a bachelor's degree in nuclear engineering from the University of Cincinnati and a master's degree in engineering from the University of Alabama, Huntsville. So, Ron, very welcome to the Institute, University of Cuyo, National Commission of Atomic Energy. So, before you start, I want to give you a small present, a map from the Institute. So, thank you for visiting. And
I'm going to give this to my wife and tell her I picked it out for her.
Okay, then I'll give you another one so you can have one too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. Especially thank you for the weather that you delivered this week. Because coming from Idaho, I was worried it might be too hot or too cold, but it's absolutely perfect. And I get the next 2 days of my life to spend here and just hang out, and I'm looking forward to that. I've been traveling a lot, and it takes quite some time to get here from Idaho, like 33 hours, but it has been worth it. What I've seen in the last 2 days is, it's a nuclear energy institute, but it's actually an energy national lab, is the way what I've learned is this isn't just about nuclear, it's about energy, it's about education. You've got something here, especially the young people in the crowd, that there's not a national lab in the U.S. that's been able to achieve, which is a degree-granting institution coupled with a national lab. That's fantastic. And then right down the road, I got to spend this morning at invitado, and I'm a nuclear engineer, and I thought I would be working nuclear power my whole life. But I lived in Western Massachusetts with my wife. We were 800 miles away from family, and we were getting ready to have our second child. So I ended up deciding I'm going to go work at another nuclear power plant in the Midwest. And Oak Ridge National Lab called me. And there's some of you that aren't going to understand this, but this is before email, and this is before the internet. Well, there was an internet, but nobody used it. Okay, and so when they called me, I said, well, I don't want to move to the south, and I don't want to work at a government institution. And I said, I got to go. And I hung up. And they called me back the next week, and they said, well, we really think you'd be a great fit. So that's how I ended up going to the high flux isotope reactor. And I loved it. I had no idea, even as a nuclear engineer in the U.S., I knew what the national labs, they were references in my textbooks, but I had no idea what a national lab could possibly do. And so I went to Haifa, and my career immediately almost went from an engineering role to an engineering and management role, and the next thing you know, I'm moving up, and I got to run what I think is the greatest research reactor in the world, no offense to any of the great invitado reactors out there. And then I got asked to go and do something else, which was, let's get involved in small Asian neutron source, which was fantastic. But ultimately, my love is nuclear energy. I think nuclear energy is so important that I make statements that people think I'm crazy, That I believe that if the United States doesn't have nuclear energy for the next 100 years as a significant contributor, I question whether it's going to remain a sovereign nation, because energy drives everything. And when you live out in the western part of the United States, you realize energy and water are what everybody fights over. And so what I've seen here in the last 2 days makes me very optimistic for us building a relationship together, and for Argentina, because you've got everything. I mean, I've seen lab space, I've met incredibly talented scientists, I see young people running around excited, and that combination of things will win the day ultimately. So let me tell you a little bit about Idaho National Lab. I'm going to put my glasses on, make sure I got the right, there we go. So we are one of 17 national labs in the Department of Energy Systems. Many of these labs used to just focus on basic science. A bunch of physicists looking at materials, computational physicists, you name it. Over the last, decade or so, a lot more applied work is being done. But at Idaho National Lab, we are the nation's nuclear lab, and we are all about applied engineering and science. So that doesn't mean, we still have a lot of PhDs, but we have a team that is looking to take we do basic research. My organization does a bunch, but we're looking to take that and actually experiment and build things. And so this is the perfect job for me. This is my last job. Okay? There's nobody who's going to recruit me out of this job, because I'm having more fun, especially now that we're building nuclear reactors again, than I'll ever have any other place. So, as you can see, we're way out west, and it's a very big state. And that's history. So after World War II was over and the United States wanted to build nuclear reactors, they used a bunch of these national labs. For example, Oak Ridge built 16 nuclear reactors, and they built all types. They built homogeneous reactors, they built molten salt reactors, they built the HIFER, and they did a lot of experimentation. If you got to the point where they were ready to actually, let's see if it can be developed to scale it up. I think that's me hitting the side button there, sorry. That's when you went to Idaho. And Idaho has built 52 reactors. And when you look at these pictures over here, you're going to see reactors that look like submarines. You're going to see reactors that are BWRs where they're like, let's try this, okay? We don't do those types of things anymore. We like to keep our reactors from exploding or boiling over. But that was the era. There were times in the U.S. when you could go to Nevada and you could build a reactor that was supposed to be used for nuclear space propulsion, and you would set it up, run hydrogen through it, and you'd watch it just melt and blow fission products all over the desert. So for the young people in the group, I miss that too, and you're not going to be able to do that. But for the generation before me, imagine the fun they had when they would, Friday night, let's go out, have a couple beers, and go, hey, if we try this next week, let's see what happens. You can't do that anymore. So now the challenge to us is we want to build out nuclear, and we want to make it advanced nuclear, which means we want to be innovative, and we want to do development, and we want to challenge ourselves. But we also have to do it in a regulatory framework that has been established for 50 years to run a nuclear reactor in the U.S. So it's a challenge. But it's a lot of fun. So going back to the state, it's a big state. And my site takes up a whole bunch of it, like 890 square miles of it, which is 2305 square kilometers. Big. Well, that gives us the ability to go out and build reactors. It also gives us a grid. It also gives us a place to be a wireless test bed. So when we talk about Idaho National Lab now, it's not just we're a nuclear lab. We're looking at, our core is in nuclear. Over 2,000 some people work in nuclear. But we also do a bunch of work on integrated energy systems. We do work on the grid. We do work on securing the grid and industrial control systems from cyber attack. Because those are all the things you're going to need to address the concerns with, I want to put nuclear reactors everywhere. And I want to put nuclear reactors everywhere. And when I say everywhere, think about every place you've seen a diesel generator in your life. So people used to love, I'm going to get my own diesel generator, I'm going to hook it up to my hospital so the hospital will never lose power. And that's great until you want clean power. And then you're like, well, I'm going to build a battery bank, but the battery bank for that hospital would have to be as big as the hospital. But a nuclear power reactor could be small, easy to operate, and could be secured. And I argue, I think I can make it a push-button reactor. Push, power comes out the other side. Now, some people don't believe that yet, but I'm pretty sure it can happen. I think we're close, actually. So, our laboratory is broken up into, this is a quick org chart, which nobody cares. So there are 3 nuclear directors. One that runs the advanced test reactor, which is the largest test reactor in the world. You can go up to 250 megawatts. And then you've got nuclear science and technology and the materials and fuels complex. So nuclear science and technology does a lot of the analysis, does modeling sim, does program management, does a lot of things to try to help support the current fleet, to try to keep the 94 reactors in the U.S. still running. And the only reason reactors shut down in the U.S. is due to economics. So we're trying to figure out in that organization, how do we make the economics better for an existing nuclear power plant? So while I was traveling here, there's a couple of things that have happened. Another microreactor was announced at Texas University. This is a university that wants to build a microreactor, not for research, but for power. And Microsoft announced that they are going to get essentially purchase the other 3 Mile Island reactor that was retired in 2019. Thank you. So that's the changing landscape, and I know things are different in every country, but worldwide over time you're seeing 2 things happen. You're seeing everybody wants clean power, and everybody realizes baseload power is important. And then the second thing is trying to electrify the automobile, trying to go to EVs and trying to have data centers that can support our demands for AI and all the other needs we have relative to computation is driving the demand of electric up. In the U.S., it's driving it up way faster than we can meet. So we can't meet the supply. I never thought in my life I would be in a situation where I'd see the U.S. have situations where we got to have rolling blackouts because we don't have enough power. And that's happening. It's happening every summer in California. It happened in the winter in Texas last year, which is the strongest part of the grid. So you got a demand that's happening. And these 3 organizations are the nuclear part. This is the Homeland Security part that's doing the cyber. And this is the part that's trying to figure out how do all these things fit together. And they do fit together, but it's not a simple task. Back when I worked at Yankee Row, has anybody ever heard of Yankee Row Nuclear Power Station? Anybody? Oh my goodness. Tough crowd. I feel old and I feel like I'm from out of town. So Yankee Row was the first commercial PWR in the United States. So it was 600 megawatts thermal, 185 megawatts electric, and they planted it out in the beautiful mountains of western Massachusetts, and it ran great for 32 years. Then they decided it was going to be too expensive to run for another 20 years because they weren't going to be able to sell power for anything less than 4 cents a kilowatt. Right now, if you live in that area, you're paying 27 cents a kilowatt. So you can't necessarily predict those things, but the point of all this is there's a world out there that needs nuclear, and it's all combined together, if that makes any sense at all. The need for clean power, the driving of where the demand is going, and what people will tolerate. Because in the U.S. we've got states saying, you can't build any more gas plants, which is how we've been surviving on natural gas for the last 30 years. And it's been super cheap because we're willing to drill holes in the ground, pump a proprietary mixture, crack the earth and suck the gas out, and think, hey, that seems real reasonable. Are there any geologists in the room? Okay, great. I can make up anything I want. Nobody will do it. It's amazing. This fracking is happening all over the country, and it's causing seismic events in places that have never had seismic events. So it'll be fun to watch how this all comes out. But my part of this is to see, can I deliver nuclear reactors? Now, our entire lab, when I came in 2015, we were doing about $880 million worth of business, and we had about 3,500 people. Now we're at $2.2 billion, and we have over 6,000 people. And this number is out of date, and we've got about 2,100 people doing just nuclear. So it's a pretty good, we've got a good critical mass of scientists, of engineers, of technicians, of operators working. And when I look here, I see the same thing. I mean, I see facilities, I see people, super enthusiastic about hydrogen. How's that? It all fits together. One of the things we're proposing to do with nuclear power is quit treating it like you can't have anything around the nuclear plant and start putting hydrogen production next to it. So that's when we talk about integrated energy systems, we're not talking about, hey, I'm going to pull the steam supply off necessarily, but I'm going to power, something that's my neighbor, which is not the way the U.S. approaches. Okay. So I'm fortunate to be able to run the Materials and Fuels Complex. And our goal in the Materials and Fuels Complex is to literally be the world center for nuclear energy research, development, demonstration, and deployment. Now that sounds kind of arrogant, because as Americans think they're the center of everything. But what I really want is it to be a center that everybody, every state, that's why I'm here. Because I don't want just the U.S. to have nuclear. I want to see nuclear in South America. And Argentina is the leader of nuclear in South America. And that's why I think it's important for us to become more connected, look at what we're doing, see where we can collaborate. And that's at everything from basic science to deployment. We shall see how this works out. But we support our nuclear energy, specifically our fission nuclear energy, almost exclusively. Then we do some national security things, then we do a little bit of radioisotopes. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this. Is a picture of my complex. It's big. It has about 80 buildings, about 30 rad and nuke buildings, and 2 reactors. One of which somebody smartly put underneath this giant hot cell, which is where we can bring fuel, we can bring full-length fuel rods from a nuclear power plant, bring them in that hot cell and do traditional post-radiation examination. But one of those radiation examinations is, I've got a reactor underneath, so there's a hole in the hot cell, and you can drop a fuel rod in there and do a neutron radiograph. So it is very cool. All right. So we are organized, not that anybody cares about my org chart that much, around our mission. So our mission areas are fuel fabrication and nuclear material management. We'll keep that there in the slide in the middle. We also do post-radiation examination. We have a great radiochemistry analytical capability. We build the radioisotope thermoelectric generators for NASA. There are 2 MFC built on Mars right now, and one other flying around the Kuiper Belt after looking closely at Pluto. And then this is what I call characterization. This is our material science. So, 10 years ago, this organization did, I don't know if I'm doing that. I quit talking with my hands. Is that possible?
You have a pointer if you want.
There we go. I need that.
The red dot?
I'll hold up that pen. So 10 years ago, we didn't have this. We didn't have a group of material scientists. We had the idea, we had an empty building, and so we started, I'm sure I've got some material scientists in the group here. A couple, there we go. All right, fantastic. There we go. It's a beautiful day. I'm sorry you had to come in here and listen to this, but I'll be quick. So the types of equipment that you love to have, which is, you get a material science, a TEM, they want more features, you get an SEM, it's the next thing, I need a fit with this plasma. We have all those, and we set them up in a facility where I can take a radiated material straight out of the advanced test reactor or out of the transient test reactor, and instead of waiting 6 years to examine them, I can have them in that facility in 3 weeks. So we bring them into the hot fuels examination facility, tear them apart, get down to the points where you care about, and then we go in and do, XRD. There's a variety of pieces of equipment that allow us to do that. And this picture is not updated because that's where I do all that work. And now there's a brand new building right next to it that we just cut the ribbon for 3 weeks ago. It's a $165 million hot cell for just structural properties research, irradiated materials, obviously. So that's us. I've also got something called production facilities because we are reprocessing the fuel that came out of the experimental breeder reactor many years ago, and we are using an electrorefining process to separate out all the garbage, keep the uranium, mixing it back to 19.75%, and we're going to use that as feedstock for one of the other of the Oklo reactor that you may or may not have heard of. All right, and then, there we go. And there we go. All right, very busy slide, but I'm just going to talk about the 5 outcomes. So before I moved from Oak Ridge to INL, Oak Ridge is in the south, it's hot, it's humid, and I love the heat and humidity. When I had to go, I used to go to INL 3 times a year. I was on a review panel for them, and every time I went, I hated it. And every time I came back, all my staff members loved it because I was so happy to be back in Tennessee, and I wouldn't complain about anything for 2 weeks. But my wife says, this is your passion. You need to go out there. And I said, well, I hate cold weather. And she says, buy a better coat. And I said, all right, now I've got like 15 coats, so I've got layers from everything. But the reason I came out here was I wanted to build advanced reactors. And in 2015, that sounded crazy. Nobody in the U.S., we were supposed to have a nuclear renaissance, and it didn't happen. And everybody's, nuclear engineering schools are getting small again. Everybody's thinking nuclear's out, it's too expensive. One company, Southern Company, is still talking about building the big ones, but nobody else is. And I go out there and I'm giving my opening speeches to my new staff. And I say, I want to build advanced reactors. And somebody says to me, what kind? I said, I don't care. We need to build something in the U.S. We have to build something. We haven't built an advanced, a new type of reactor in over 40 years. And then I said something about I really don't like molten salt reactors, and of course now I'm building a molten salt reactor, but that's okay. I said, as I said, I'll be agnostic about this. We just need to do it. And what we've learned, and I'm going to look at all the students here, you guys are going to become so good at modeling and sim and analysis, you're going to be incredible. Building brings you a whole new series. Your model can be incredibly precise and wildly inaccurate. And so what we do at MFC is we do experiments and we are doing demonstrations. And what we're proving to ourselves is it's hard, and we're not as smart as we thought we were, and we're going to get it done anyway. So the first one is build reactors. The second one is fabricate nuclear fuels for demonstration test reactors and advanced technologies for used fuel treatment. So this gets back to, I'm going to reprocess materials, I'm going to pull the uranium out, I'm going to get it mixed to the right, and I'm going to go build something that, when Southern Company and TerraPower decided they wanted to build a reactor, they said they wanted to be a molten chloride reactor. I said, no, that's not the right kind of salt. They said, no, we want to try something completely different. And I was like, wow, I can't wait to start. And then we found out that the development of that is much harder than what it looks like in paper. Because in paper, you do the chemistry, and it says, oh, you add this, you do that, and it falls out. It's all going to be simple. When we first started doing it, we're getting molten chlorides out of it. We're getting a chloride salt out of the uranium, but we're only able to use about 20% of the uranium. So nobody's going to ever use that. But building nuclear fuels are hard, and you know that. I would say this organization has done several, but in the future, you might need to be challenged if you say, hey, we're going to try new things. And building fuels, new fuels, never works out like it's supposed to. You got to do 2 things. You got to get the recipe right, and then you got to get it so you can repeat it 1,000,000 times. It comes out the same every single time, and that's a challenge. The next thing I've already talked about, we perform a ton of irradiation analysis of both fuels and materials, and we are getting very, 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 very good at it. INL has always been good at it, but we've really done a really nice job of updating equipment. The Department of Energy has invested, since I've been there, probably about $200 million and let me go into facilities and change out the scientific equipment in facilities. At the same time, I think my organization has 178 manipulators to do the remote handle work through hot cells. You know, those things love to break. It seems pretty pedestrian, but those are the kind of things that need to work right every single time if you want to do the amount of work that we're doing. And then I'm going to skip over this column right here. You're going to hear. So that I go out there to interview on the. So remember, anybody here for the Igor meeting in 2014 when you guys hosted that? I was supposed to be here. Okay, I was loving the thought of coming here. And then INL says, no, we want you to come out and interview that week. I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to be in Argentina. I've never been to Argentina. It looks like a really fun place. I like mountains, I like water. But instead, I went and interviewed at Idaho National Lab for the job I had. They interviewed me for 2 days. Let's see, 17 hours and 51 people, all right? I get done, I said, yep, this is it, this is great. I come and get to take the job. I'm on my second week in the job, and they send me to a project meeting about a thing called a remote handled low-level waste facility we're building for permanent repository of remote handled low-level waste. I don't even care what the acronym means. I sit through the whole meeting, the project is a disaster, it's over budget already, and they haven't done anything. And at the end of it, I asked my lab director, I said, why? Why was I even in that meeting? He goes, oh, that's your responsibility. And he pulls out a sticky note and he writes down, you need to go read these documents because we have a whole bunch of legacy waste that you're responsible because the lab's responsible and that falls in your division. Now, you're probably wondering, why such a long story? You can look at that one of two ways. You can look at that as a huge liability. It's on the books as a $3.4 billion liability. Or you can look at that material and say, you know what, there's research to be done there. And there's ways to solve this more than just, digging more holes and putting it in the ground. And so we've taken advantage of that in a fundamental way. When I was here, I got to see that you're also working at it, in a way that I thought looked fairly familiar and fairly not familiar. So when I see the collaboration areas, let's take a plasma and burn that, let's burn it and see what happens. Okay, now we're doing something similar with electrical probes in situ, trying to see if we can get it to vitrify right in the ground on some of these things. But this matters to our nuclear industry as much as anything. And it doesn't matter because it's political, it matters because of the cost. So when you want to keep building nuclear, you got to get the waste, the back end of the fuel cycle dealt with. So everything you're going to generate has got a home and it's got a reasonable path. That is not going to be done through politics or politicians figuring it out or states suing each other in the U.S. It's going to be done by scientists going, I can find a better way to deal with all the different waste types. And then the last one I always talk about is, I mentioned it already, we build the RTGs that go, and I get really cool pictures, but COVID made it so I couldn't be at the launch. And so I just thought I'd throw that in because, this is my time to talk, and it was very disappointing because I was going to sit on the beach in Florida at the Cape and watch it. Nobody wanted that spot. I was like, that would be the perfect spot. If you've ever seen the movie The Right Stuff, I'm probably totally dating myself with every one of these references. There's a little house on the beach down at Cape Canaveral where they show it, The Right Stuff. And I was like, hey, can I get the house? Because I don't want to, I don't do anything. I'm in management. I just sit and watch and encourage people to do better. And I just wanted to sit on that beach and watch that rocket launch. About 1 month before the launch, they finally said it's only essential personnel because COVID was. And then it turned out to be like a prison for my folks that went down there because they had to, you couldn't leave your hotel room. They were delivering food, but you'd go and set up the RTG on the rocket before we set it off. So totally getting off track there. So what are our core competencies? I've covered most of these. Fuel fab, we do plate, we do oxides, we extruded some fuel for Lightbridge, so some annular fuel for the first time about 2 weeks ago. So there's always new things happening there. Characterization, we characterize fuels before we irradiate them, after we irradiate them. This is the worst looking picture ever. Those 3 paint cans are actually nuclear material cans. We have tons and tons of plutonium, uranium, and all types of special nuclear materials. So when people come to us and say, I want to make something, then I said, well, hey, let me open the vault, I'll get it out, and we'll see what we can do. We talked about characterization, chemistry, the transient test reactor. Again, I was skeptical. that thing is workhorse right now because so many of these new reactor startups want to start up the reactor and not do any experimentation. What they want to do is tell me, hey, I've got this great model, here's how this fuel's going to behave, and trust me, the licensing, it'll be all good. It'll run just like we thought it was. And everybody does. But one test you can do is you can sit there and pulse it to 17 gigawatts and see how it behaves in accident conditions. And that does give them some bounding information for the models. This one is huge. And we are knee-deep in it. So we're working on 3 reactors officially, 5 unofficially. And we are working in one case, we're doing all the design work ourselves and safety analysis. In others, we're partnering with some startup companies and others in Westinghouse and BWXT, established nuclear folks in the U.S. But that ability to design and license is huge. And that's where Invest is fantastic. I mean, Impact has proven themselves. They can go all over the world and build nuclear reactors and meet whatever regulatory standards there are in each country. So I think that's a good area. We also are taking 2 facilities and turning them into test beds. The old EBR2 dome is going to be available so they can bring a reactor in and remove 10 megawatts of power. And then the old zipper, which is the zero power plutonium reactor, it also is emptied, and we're getting ready to put a test bed in there. So if you need a test bed that's a little bit more secure, you can put a reactor there. A little bit in non-proliferation nuclear forensics, just because of our capabilities in analytical, we do that. But we're not trying to expand there at all. We do a little bit of isotope production in cobalt-60, high specific activity coming out of APR. There's a huge demand in the U.S. for isotopes. The isotopes program is kind of, in my tenure since 1992, is, well, we can buy foreign, no, we better, they go up and down with whether or not they want domestic production. Now they want a ton of domestic production. They turn to me and I'm like, I don't have any space to do it. So that's an interesting challenge. Talk about space nuclear. And our focus, basic research, is almost all on materials. All right. We have a lot of facilities. They're very cool, just like your facilities. And some of them are in better shape and some are in worse, but we're in this kind of the same boat. I will applaud the leadership here at your facilities. I don't know how you get all your nuclear buildings to smell as good as they do. I think it's the cooking that's going on outside and inside of them. But Bonnie, did you not see the same thing this week? It was like, wow, every time mine smell like musty, my old ones. I'm not going to let my new ones get that way, but we're in the same challenge. You have a bunch of facilities with a bunch of capabilities. You're trying to figure out where to invest. But what we are at a spot now where they're so utilized. I've had to go 24 hours a day in both the hot fuels examination facility and the fuel conditioning facility. You just get to a spot where it's like, I can't afford to buy more, and I don't have the time to build more. I'm just going to have to, I'm going to have to ask my material scientists to come in on the weekends and use the equipment then. And so far, it's been, there's not been a revolution, but it's been a little sketchy at times. And then there's one of my beautiful waste facilities, if anybody needs any radioactive waste. So this is a busy chart of all the reactors that are being proposed in the United States. And this isn't all of them. To get on this chart, you've got to have funding, you've got to have DOE support, you've got to have a site selected. And so the nuance in this is in many of these, you're going to see the reactor with the state of Idaho in the background. But in some, you're going to see the state of Tennessee, you're going to see the state of Texas, you're going to see, let's see, where's the Illinois one? I know it's on here someplace.
Down here, I think.
Which one is it?
At the bottom, the MMR.
Yep, there we go. MMR. So that's the University of Illinois. Another one was announced as I came here down in Texas for those that have been Christian. And then these 3 are fighting to figure out who's the first one in the dome. So I'm going to have this dome done, and they're going to be pretty much constructed. So the Department of Energy is working on an answer. In the meantime, we're just working on the reactors. And they're being built. So, there's physical construction. This marble reactor is the Department of Energy, so that's our design. And we've got the outer vessel form. We're working on the primary coolant system. We're getting the fuel made. So it's going to be 2027 is going to be a really good year for me, or I'm going to retire. Not by my choice, okay? So, you know, my lab director is great. If anybody knows John Wagner, he's fantastic. He's wildly enthusiastic about this stuff, but he builds something. So we're getting close. And you also, this is just a map of the U.S. to show you where they're planned out. There's probably about, gosh, Bonnie, I should have come with a number. There's between 30 and 40 startup companies that says they're going to build nuclear reactors in the U.S. Okay, and it's I don't know how venture capital works, and I don't have the kind of money to hand somebody $5 million and say good luck and see if this works. If it doesn't, no big deal. But they're able to raise tens of millions of dollars with a reactor concept that's pretty, you know, not developed. And then they need to figure out, okay, what's next? And the biggest what's next in the U.S. is, where do I get my fuel? Because we spent a bunch of money about 15 years ago tearing out a lot of our enrichment capability because, well, it's not cost competitive and it's okay to buy foreign sources, and until that foreign sources, you know, invades another country and, you know, makes it so we don't want to buy from them anymore. And so it's really a challenge. You need the feedstock, you need the enrichment capability, and then you need the ability to make the fuel. And right now, there's only one vendor in the United States that can do fuel fabrication greater than 5% enrichment. And so they turn to us a lot, and I wish I could help them a lot. I want to be able to make the fuel for them. But what I can do is develop the recipe for them. But I can't, and I'd like to get to the point where I could give them one core of a microreactor, you know, kind of like a, you know, invitado research reactor, but we're not even there. So everybody's their schedules are all pushed out because they're all working on the fuels. And let's see. And then here they are, Marble, which is going to go into like a underground storage area in my transient test reactor. And this has been, when it was first proposed, the person in an S&T, that's it, 1 minute? I got 1 minute? Okay. 5 would have been good. I don't know if I can do it. No, it's been way more expensive and taken a lot longer. That's a simple, short version. Somebody thought we'd get this done for 20-some million. It's probably going to cost about 100-some million. And that's what it takes to build a nuclear reactor. The next one is, this is Pele, and this will give you another innovation challenge. They want to be able to drive this reactor onto my site, set it up, operate it, pack it back up in the boxes, drive it around, and then set it up someplace else and operate it. And for those of you who do nuclear safety analysis, that's not the paradigm we have right now. You know, you want to build a nuclear reactor someplace, you spend 3-4 years just working on the environmental study. And so we're sliding the ratings on this. It's really going well. But you know, I'm getting a little old when they said I want to build a reactor and put it right out in the middle of nowhere and operate it. I was kind of like, well, I got this nice dome, why don't you stick it in there in case it screws up really bad and I can clean it up. So it's taken a lot of, you know, you got to get yourself out of your comfort zone, and we're working it. And then lastly, here's a molten chloride reactor experiment. So they're in love with molten chloride salt fuel because they got this idea of, hey, I can just continually pull some out, put some in, and get this nice, you know, power density out of something that's at a relatively low pressure. And it's fun working with a group like TerraPower because it's all Bill Gates type people and they've got innovative ideas, but they're not nukes. But they're certainly they're certainly in that mode now. They've got a good team of people. Southern Company has a great team of people, and it's challenging because when you're working with the utility, they think about cost and schedule, you know, all the time. And it's like, well, we're doing development work. You know, I'll tell you, I'll give you cost and schedule once I'm done doing development. They don't want to wait for that. They want things done. So that's our life. And there's my dome test bed. Another old picture. Somebody's calling me. Let me hang up. And there's the Lotus, and here's the MFC site in the beautiful Idaho desert. someday I'll get a picture where it's not, you know, where you can actually see the mountains and see how beautiful it is. Just like when I flew in here, I felt I was like home. It looked like, you know, high elevation desert and some beautiful mountains. But you've got a lake that's a little nicer than my desert, I'm not gonna lie. So that's it. I will take any questions. How did I do on time? I can't even read my watch.